My name is Grace, I'm 30 years old. Today I'm going to talk about the day that I shocked everyone by buying out the family business and firing my abusive sister. It's a pleasure to have you here. Stay tuned until the end and tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story has gone. And click on like, subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss the next stories here on the channel. I always knew I wasn't the favorite, but I never thought they'd make it so obvious. Growing up in a family like mine, silence spoke louder than words. My parents ran a luxury goods business, started it from scratch back in the late 80s. It was all-consuming, and my sister Catherine? She was their golden child. She had the confidence, the looks, the charm. She knew how to work a room before she could drive. And I was the quiet one. The helper. The background noise. Catherine was 5 years older, and from the time we were little, she carried this sense of entitlement like a crown. While I was setting the dinner table or folding brochures in the back office during summer breaks, she was flying first class with our parents to international trade shows. I was never asked if I wanted to be part of the business. It was just assumed I would support it, not lead it. I remember my 16th birthday like a punch to the stomach. Catherine had just graduated from college and my parents threw her a massive celebration. Champagne, catered food, a rented ballroom. A month later, for my birthday, they handed me an envelope with a prepaid debit card and a note. "We're proud of you too." That word haunted me. After college, I asked if I could take on more responsibility in the company. My father smiled politely and said, "Your sister has it under control. Why don't you help in HR or something?" I did. For 6 years. I ran HR, payroll, and handled employee disputes that Catherine didn't have time for. And still, in every board meeting, I was referred to as Catherine's sister. Catherine wasn't just dismissive. She was cruel in subtle, sophisticated ways. She'd make jokes about my people skills in front of staff. Once during a team retreat, she introduced me as our moral support, the company mascot. People laughed. I did too. But I remember the sting behind my eyes, the tightness in my throat as I smiled through it. She always had a way of diminishing me without ever raising her voice. It wasn't just her. My parents reinforced it. Whenever I tried to share an idea or raise a concern, my mother would nod with that tight smile of hers and say, "Let Catherine handle it, sweetheart." Then came the investor meeting. It was meant to be a routine quarterly review. Catherine had delegated me to prepare the HR portion, which I did thoroughly. But during the presentation, she cut me off mid-sentence and said, "Sorry, Grace, but let me fix that before you confuse everyone." Everyone chuckled. I stood there, heart hammering, cheeks burning, trying to hold my voice steady as I responded. "Actually, the report was reviewed by..." She turned back to the investors and talked over me. Not just once, but twice. Then she looked me in the eye with that rehearsed, patient smile and said, "We'll talk later. Thanks, Grace." That was the moment something shifted. Not all at once. It wasn't a lightning bolt. It was a slow, aching realization that I would never be seen. Not by them. Not unless I did something drastic. I had spent years being the good daughter, the patient sister, the team player. And all it had gotten me was a front row seat to my own invisibility. That night, I sat in my car in the company parking lot for nearly an hour. Just sitting there. No music. No phone. Just silence. I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. And then I cried. Not loud, sobbing tears. Just the quiet kind. The ones that leak out when you finally admit to yourself that something is broken. A week later, I started looking into business management courses. Quietly. At night. After work. I signed up for a part-time MBA program. I used my savings. No one in the company knew. I didn't want anyone's approval or encouragement. I just wanted something that was mine. 2 months in, I reconnected with an old mentor of my father's, Mr. Landon, a retired executive who'd always liked me, despite rarely seeing me at the forefront. Over coffee, I told him everything. The company, the dynamic, Catherine. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "Grace, sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who least want to see you change." That sentence stayed with me. He also mentioned something else, something I hadn't known. The company wasn't as stable as it seemed. There were talks among minor shareholders about restructuring. Financial reports showed slow decline. My father had started quietly withdrawing from operations. Catherine was running things, yes, but she wasn't doing a good job. It was the first time I saw a crack in their empire. And it was also the first time I considered the impossible. What if I didn't have to stay invisible? What if I could own it? And that question, fragile and absurd as it seemed then, refused to go away. Next board meeting was in 2 weeks. Catherine didn't know I had a plan. Not yet. From the outside, nothing had changed. I still showed up at 8 a.m. sharp. Still brought coffee for the front desk staff. Still sat 2 seats away from Catherine in every meeting, silently flipping through paperwork like it wasn't all a countdown. But inside, I was already gone. My MBA courses became a lifeline. I'd sneak into the office storage room during lunch breaks just to listen to lectures with one headphone in. At night, I studied until my eyes burned. Accounting, operations, crisis management. Every class made me realize how deeply mismanaged the company had become under Catherine. She wasn't evil, just careless. Entitled. She treated the business like her personal playground. Everything was about appearances, hosting extravagant product launches, hiring influencers to promote handbags, throwing money at trends she didn't understand. Meanwhile, payroll was often late. Staff turnover was getting worse. And clients, old loyal ones, were quietly disappearing. Mr. Landon introduced me to an investor named Elliot. He was calm, methodical, and had a background in corporate rescue. We met in private twice. I told him I wanted to buy my parents' shares, that I had a strategy to turn the company around quietly. At first, he was skeptical. Then I showed him the numbers. And he said yes. My parents still had majority control, split equally between them. Catherine owned 20%. I knew I'd never convince her to sell. But my parents? They were tired. I could see it. My mother started missing meetings. My father was traveling more often. I caught them one evening in the boardroom, alone, reviewing a list of private buyers. They were considering selling. That night I made my move. I invited them to dinner at my apartment. Nothing fancy. I made pasta. We sat cramped at my little table while they sipped wine and made small talk. Then I said it. I want to buy your shares. My mother stared at me like I'd spoken another language. My father set down his glass slowly. What for, Grace? To run the company. Properly. My mother laughed, quietly, but it still cut. Catherine won't like that. This isn't about Catherine. It's about saving what you built. And I know you know it's falling apart. They didn't answer right away. But 2 days later, my father emailed me. One sentence. Let's talk options. Over the next month, Elliot and I worked out the terms. It wasn't easy. There were conditions, protections, caveats. But I managed to buy out both my parents without alerting Catherine. They didn't even tell her they were stepping down. Just handed her a resignation letter and told her they were taking time off. She didn't ask questions. That was the thing about Catherine. So secure in her status, she never looked over her shoulder. Until the day of the board meeting. I arrived early, heart pounding. I wore the same navy blazer I'd worn to interviews years ago. No makeup, no jewelry, just focus. Catherine waltzed in 15 minutes late, all designer heels and loud laughter. She looked at me and smirked. Still taking notes, Grace? I smiled back. Then the meeting began. Our CFO, who had reviewed the change in shares, announced the new ownership structure. There was a silence so thick I could hear my own pulse. Catherine blinked. Excuse me. The CFO cleared his throat. Grace now holds majority voting rights. Effective immediately. Catherine looked at me like I'd stabbed her. You, she whispered. You did this. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just said, yes. And there will be changes. She stood. You can't do this. You're not capable. You don't know what you're doing. I took a breath. Actually, I do. I've been learning. Quietly. For a long time. She looked to the board members, but they didn't back her. Some even looked relieved. I opened my folder. Effective today, Catherine's position is terminated. She froze. You're firing me? Yes. The room didn't erupt. There were no shouts. Just silence. The kind that comes after something heavy drops. Catherine grabbed her bag, her face red and stunned, and walked out without another word. I sat there, hands shaking under the table, pretending to flip through the next agenda item. But inside, I was breathing for the first time in years. I had taken the company, and now I had to save it. But first, I had to survive the aftermath. Catherine wasn't done with me yet. What would you do if it were you? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe and activate the bell to receive all notifications so you don't miss the next story. The days after Catherine's firing were nothing short of chaos. Quiet chaos, the kind that seeps into your skin and makes it hard to breathe. I came into work the next morning with a knot in my stomach. I expected backlash, screaming, even lawsuits. But instead, the silence was colder. The staff avoided eye contact. Emails slowed. Doors were left ajar mid-conversation. I wasn't just the new CEO. I was the sister who took down the golden girl. And Catherine wasn't making it easier. She started small, late-night texts, vague and biting. Hope you're enjoying the chair that was too big for you. Or, let's see how long you last without daddy holding your hand. Then she moved on to the employees. Some of her closest allies, department heads she had promoted, resigned without notice. One sent me a single line in her resignation email: "Loyalty matters." I won't lie. I cried after that one. Not because I missed her, but because that word, loyalty, felt like a punch in the gut. I had been loyal. For years. I had swallowed every insult, every humiliation. And now I was the villain? It made me question everything. But something surprising happened the following week. Marcia, our longest-serving receptionist, knocked on my office door one morning. She came in, closed it behind her, and sat down without asking. I prepared myself for more coldness. Instead, she said, "You did the right thing." I blinked. "Excuse me. We've all seen how Catherine treated you. And the rest of us. She made us feel like we were lucky just to have jobs here. You treat people like they matter. That means something." I didn't know what to say. I think I just nodded. But after she left, I sat there in stunned silence for almost 20 minutes. Someone saw me. Someone noticed. From that moment, I stopped apologizing. I met with each department one by one. I listened. I took notes. I started small, shifting budgets, ending unnecessary contracts, reviewing internal processes. I didn't try to make sweeping changes or prove myself overnight. I just wanted to stabilize the ship. But even as the days grew calmer at the office, things at home unraveled. My parents refused to speak to me. They didn't yell. They didn't confront me. They just stopped answering my calls. I found out through a family friend that they had flown to Europe for a rest period. Not a word to me. It hurt. More than I expected. I had told myself this wasn't about winning anyone's approval, that I didn't need their validation. But the truth is, I still wanted it. I wanted them to see I was capable. I wanted to be their daughter, not their disappointment. But what I got was silence. And then Catherine sent a letter. It was handwritten. 2 pages. No apology, no acknowledgement of her behavior. Just anger. She accused me of betrayal, of stealing the company, of destroying the family. She ended it with a line that made my hands shake. "You've ruined everything. I hope it was worth it." I read that line over and over. Was it worth it? Yes. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't living in someone else's shadow. Because I could walk into my own office and not feel like an imposter. Because I was finally building something that reflected me. Not Catherine, not my parents. Me. And in that clarity, I found something else. Resolve. I hired a new HR director, someone with experience in rebuilding company cultures. We conducted anonymous surveys. We overhauled our employee feedback process. I personally met with every single staff member who had been with the company longer than 5 years. One day, during a walk through the warehouse, a junior staffer stopped me and said, "Thanks for not quitting when she made you feel invisible." I smiled. But inside, my heart cracked. People had noticed more than I thought. I wasn't just reclaiming a company. I was repairing something broken. Not just in the business, but in me. Still, one thing lingered. What if my parents never came back? What if, in choosing myself, I had lost them for good? 3 months passed. I didn't hear a single word from my parents. No calls. No emails. Nothing. The house I grew up in was suddenly a closed door. I'd drive past it sometimes, out of habit more than anything, and wonder if they were home, if they were even still in the country. The silence was louder than any argument could have been. But at work, things were starting to breathe. Slowly. Carefully. The tension among the staff eased little by little. People started greeting me with real smiles. There were fewer closed-door meetings. I could sense it. People were waiting to see who I really was. And I was determined to show them. I started making rounds in departments I'd never been invited into before. The warehouse. Customer service. Even the mailroom. Not to inspect, just to say hello. To ask how things were going. It was awkward at first, but over time I started getting honest answers. Suggestions. Complaints. Ideas. It turned out, all people ever wanted was to be heard. One afternoon, I got a message from James, a mid-level logistics manager who'd been with the company since I was in high school. We met in the break room. He didn't even sit down. "Grace," he said, clearing his throat, "I've seen 3 COs come through here. And you're the only one who ever asked us what we needed. I don't know if you'll last, but it matters. Just wanted you to know that." He left before I could respond. I stood there for a long time. That evening, I worked late. I pulled up old expense reports, looked at supplier contracts Catherine had signed, and made lists, actual pen and paper lists, of what had to change. It was overwhelming. But for the first time, I didn't feel small doing it. I felt capable. Then one night my doorbell rang. It was nearly 10 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and felt my breath catch. My father. He looked older. Tired. Like the weight of everything had finally landed on his shoulders. I opened the door. We just stood there. No hug. No words. Just staring. "Can I come in?" he asked. I nodded. He sat on the edge of my couch like he didn't belong in the room. I offered tea. He declined. Finally he spoke. "Your mother is still angry. Catherine, she's furious. She says she never saw it coming." I stayed silent. I didn't trust myself to speak. He went on. "I didn't come to talk about them. I came because I think I owe you an apology." That broke something in me. He looked down at his hands. "I never saw you. Not really. You were just there. Always helping. Never asking for anything. And we let Catherine take all the space. We let her become something she shouldn't have. That's on us." Still I said nothing. "But the way you handled this? The way you're running the company? I've heard things. Good things. From people I trust." Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. "You didn't steal anything, Grace. You saved it. We just didn't see it happening." He stood up then. Walked to the door. "Your mother won't say it. Maybe she never will. But I needed you to know." He hesitated, then added, "We're not good at apologies. But we're trying." Then he left. I stood there for a long time, hand on the doorknob, wondering what had just happened. It wasn't a full repair. It wasn't even a beginning. But it was something. And in a family like mine, that counted for more than it should. A week later, I walked into the building and passed by the old conference room. The plaque still had Catherine's name etched under the title, Executive Director. I stood there, looking at it, remembering all the times I'd been asked to wait outside while decisions were made. Then I reached into my bag, pulled out a small screwdriver from my keychain toolkit, and removed the plaque myself. I walked it straight to the storage closet, placed it on the shelf, and closed the door. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like air. But Catherine wasn't done. She was planning something. And this time, she was coming for my reputation. At first, I didn't know what was happening. Subtle things started to shift. A longtime supplier suddenly paused our deliveries, citing contract confusion. An online business blog published a vague piece suggesting the company was being mismanaged under new leadership. Then a trusted junior manager quit overnight, No notice, no goodbye. I knew the signs. Catherine was pulling strings. She still had contacts. Old favors to call in. People who believed in her version of events. And she wasn't going to stop at hurt feelings. She wanted to ruin me. I didn't panic. Not outwardly. But the stress was eating at me. I started waking up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat. My inbox flooded with anonymous complaints. Half of them nonsense, clearly written by the same hand. The worst part? I couldn't prove any of it. One morning, I walked into a meeting with our sales team and found the mood icy. Conversations stopped when I entered. I asked a question. No one responded. Just silence and blank stares. After the meeting, one of the newer reps pulled me aside. They think you pushed Catherine out to sell the company to some private firm. That you're gutting it for a payout. My jaw clenched. Where did they hear that? He shrugged. Rumors. But it's everywhere. Even some clients are asking questions. I knew exactly who was behind it. And it broke something in me. Not anger. Not revenge. Just deep, gnawing disappointment. Because after everything, after proving myself, after trying to do it right, this was how it would go? I locked myself in my office that night. Didn't go home. Ordered takeout and sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by files. At 11:42 p.m., I opened my laptop and wrote a company-wide memo. Not corporate fluff. Not polished PR. Just truth. I shared what had happened with the leadership transfer. The decision my parents had made. The silent years of being overlooked. The steps I was taking to repair the damage. Not only financially, but culturally. I addressed the rumors head-on. And I ended it with this. You don't have to like me. But I ask you to judge me on what I do. Not what you hear. I'm here. I'm listening. And I'm not going anywhere. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I came in expecting worse. But to my surprise, something shifted. People looked at me differently. Not everyone. But enough. One of the warehouse team leads nodded at me in the hallway. Another manager left a sticky note on my desk. Thanks for being honest. A small group of employees asked to set up a lunch meeting. To share ideas for improving internal communication. Someone even brought me a coffee unprompted. Catherine's smear campaign hadn't failed. But it hadn't won either. And that gave me a new kind of strength. The company wasn't just surviving. It was learning how to breathe again. Not through perfection, but through transparency. Still, I was tired. Deeply tired. Carrying the weight of this redemption, this restoration. It was heavy. And it was lonely. One afternoon, I stood alone in the elevator, watching the floor numbers blink. And I thought, maybe this is what leadership really is. Being willing to walk alone through fire, just so others can stop being burned. 2 weeks later, I got an email. From my mother. 3 lines. We're back in town. Your father says you've made some changes. I'd like to see for myself. No warmth. No apology. But it was something. I invited her to the office. No formal tour. Just an open seat in a staff meeting. She came. Sat in the back. Said nothing. But she listened. She watched how people responded to me. She saw the team brainstorm without fear. She watched the head of design, a woman Catherine used to mock, present a new product concept with full confidence. At the end of the meeting, my mother stood. Grace, may I speak with you privately? We stepped into my office. She sat down. I waited. It's different, she said. The energy. I nodded. It had to be. She looked at me for a long time. You were never loud. That's why we didn't see you. I didn't respond. But I see it now, she added quietly. What you're doing. Who you've become. Then she stood. No hug. No apology. Just a slight touch on my shoulder as she walked past me. I sat down at my desk, still processing it. And I realized. I wasn't waiting for their love anymore. I had built something better. Respect. But there was still one thing I needed to do. And it would happen in the next board meeting. Because I wasn't just going to clean the house Catherine left behind. I was going to redesign it from the foundation. The boardroom was full. Every seat taken. Faces that once dismissed me now watched me with measured interest. I wore black slacks, a gray blouse, and no makeup. I didn't want to look powerful. I wanted to look exact. I stood at the head of the table. My fingers rested lightly on a folder marked Proposal for Structural Reform. This company, I began, was built by my parents. But it survived because of the people in this room, and the people not in this room. Warehouse workers, designers, admins, people who stayed even when things got bad, even when they weren't seen. Some nodded, others just watched. I took a breath. It's time we stop pretending leadership is about titles. It's about contribution. And that's why I'm changing everything. I opened the folder, passed copies around. The proposal was clear. Flatten the management structure, expand employee voting rights on major decisions, increase pay transparency, implement profit sharing for teams meeting growth targets. And most controversial of all, dissolve the current executive board in 6 months and replace it with a rotating leadership committee selected internally. There was a beat of silence after I finished. One board member, Mr. Halpern, cleared his throat. Grace, this is unprecedented. Are you sure? I met his gaze. No. But it's necessary. Another asked, what if this destabilizes everything? I leaned forward. It already was unstable. It just looked polished from the outside. We've been rewarding control instead of collaboration. That ends now. The vote wasn't unanimous. But it passed. And just like that, I dismantled the old guard. It wasn't easy. Implementing the changes took months. There were missteps, resentments, people who thought I was doing too much, too fast. Catherine, for one, gave an interview to a small podcast claiming she was pushed out by a jealous sibling with no real business sense. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The results spoke louder. 6 months later, our revenue had stabilized. Employee turnover dropped. Customer retention improved. And something else happened, something quieter. People smiled more, laughed in the hallways, took pride in their work. The building that once felt like Catherine's castle now felt like a collective space. Alive, functional, human. I never saw Catherine again. She moved to another city, started a consultancy. From what I heard, it never took off. But I stopped keeping tabs. It wasn't my story to follow anymore. My parents never gave me a grand moment of reconciliation. There was no big family dinner, no apology speech. But over time, small things returned. A holiday card. A check-in text from my father. My mother dropped by one afternoon just to bring lemon cake, like she used to. It wasn't love, maybe. But it was something like peace. One Friday evening, long after everyone had gone home, I walked the floors of the building alone. Stopping by departments. Touching the edges of desks, posters, team photos. I ended up in the old boardroom. The plaque had been replaced. It now read, Shared Leadership Room. No one's name on it. Just possibility. I sat down in the seat where Catherine used to preside. Not to claim it, but to understand it. I thought about the girl I used to be. Quiet, dismissed, always waiting to be invited in. She wouldn't have believed where she was now. Not the title. Not the numbers. But the feeling. Of being enough. Of no longer asking for space. Of owning it. And as I looked out across the empty chairs, I smiled. Not because I'd won. But because I was finally free. The invisible daughter had left the room. For good. If you like stories like these, click like, subscribe, activate the bell and send it to someone you think will also like it.